This is 8-3.
Okay. Law of science. Have you noticed that I'm not the only one not finding how to do that?
Yes. All right, so let's go ahead and put this on here just so we know. Okay? Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so on here, let's go ahead and write that area of a trapezoid. Wasn't sure if we know this or not, but let's just sneak it up here. That this equals 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times height.
Not times or plus?
Where?
We already know
On the, in the parentheses.
It's plus.
Okay.
Base 1 plus base 2
Why?
times 1/2 times height. And I always think of it as the average over basis times height.
Can you times it by height first? I mean, 1/2 first.
Technically, you would have to order operations to do the parentheses first.
Well, yeah, but like, you know what I mean? Also, it doesn't matter. It's multiplication.
Yeah.
Why are you gonna write that whole time thing, right? Like, put it in.
What I was saying.
Put it inside?
No, just put it next to it.
Okay.
That's what I was saying, but that's fine. You could write it.
Why else is creative? So he's the one that has the degree.
Yeah, I've got 2 degrees
That's not
Oh,
fair.
where from? Well, yeah,
from
next
Grove
year.
City Community College.
It's a pretty acute,
I wonder why.
Columbus State.
That's
Trash.
We all know dictionary.
All right, so law of signs. Law of signs. So the law of signs is just sitting here. Says that you can write a proportion related to the angles and the sides of a triangle. I want to point something out here, Eli. What type of triangle do you have to do the law of signs?
Or right
A right
triangle.
triangle.
Oh,
A triangle.
Any triangle, this works.
Oh.
So we're so used that trig deals with right triangles. Yes, usually it's, I'm sorry?
Trigonometry only applies to right triangles.
SOHCAHTOA only applies to right triangles.
Well,
This-
yeah, but that's SOHCAHTOA. That's not trigonometry. Trigonometry is just like triangles, right?
Okay, yes, thank you.
Okay, never mind. I'll shut up.
Okay, so the biggest mistake people will say, well, where's the right 90-degree angle? There's no right, doesn't have to have a 90-degree angle for this to work. So I also want to point out that if I wanted to, I could rewrite this law of signs as what? I could write it as sine of A over what? Over A equals sine B. You're allowed to always just flip fractions if you want, as long as you do it to both sides, or in this case, maybe all 3 sides. Can we stop tapping, please? Okay. So why is it sine and not
So,
sin or?
so.
Yeah, like how do we say it that way?
I am not sure.
Okay.
Why can't
I
we?
can look that up for you.
Why can't we just name them like so we can like co like
Co.
SOHCAHTOA, like you have to name it.
I like that, but
So you can remember it.
That was the first letter, sine, cosine, tangent, and the orange hippos always have orange thing.
That's dumb.
all right. So that's it's the orange. She told me something about an orange hippo, and I was like, I don't know what she's talking about. All right, so let's try a problem here. Number 1. So it says find all unknown sides and angles. Okay. I want to do the angle first because that to me looks like the easiest. How can I find this unknown angle? Triangle angle sum theorem. Awesome. So 151 plus 77 minus 180, that's 52 degrees. Okay. To find an unknown side. So I don't know. If I were to use the way that they typically like to write this side here would be called what?
Y,
Y and
Z,
X.
X, lowercase. Okay. They like to use the side across from it.
How do you write a lowercase x?
Exactly, just a smaller.
Yeah, it's literally
How
small.
do you write uppercase one?
With the straight one down
I
there.
can't write.
So the law of signs says that I can write fractions here. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I have to have just one unknown. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the sine of 77, and it doesn't matter whether we put this on top or the bottom, goes on top of what? 7.
why not 77? Oh, okay. Sorry.
And I can then say that the sine of 52 is over y. So I have one unknown here. And in some ways, this would have been easier if I put the other ones on top. How do you guys like to solve this?
Yeah.
Do you like to cross multiply? Okay. So we get y sine of 77 equals 7 sine of 52.
Wait, Mr. O'Connell,
Yes.
why don't you do, like, sine of 51 and then x over x?
We're going to do that next.
Over what?
Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Okay. So,
Divide by sine 77.
right. So one thing we got to make sure we're doing with these is whatever calculator we're using, we have to make sure we're in the right modes. There's two types of degrees. Well, the two types of angles. There's degrees and radians. We're not going to be talking about radians, but most calculators get set to that. If I hit the mode button on this calculator, for example, it tells me right here in the bottom that it says degrees. And if I hit it again, I guess it doesn't. I don't know how to change it on this, but I want it to be in degrees. If I use the red triangle, how do you know that you're in the right mode?
I have this.
Because it'll give you bad answers.
What is radians?
Yeah, that screwed me up on my homework.
Radians are, it's translated into relationship to pi. So you talk about pi equals something in degrees, okay? So there's a whole another math where it's based on pi.
Is that the thing we were trying to do yesterday? I don't know.
I don't know, was pi showing up in that?
Yes, lots of pot.
Okay.
Wait,
In
what?
our question on 8-1, I think it was. What?
Using like times 15 pi and stuff like that.
The original.
Like the one where we had and like
This one
50
caught up on the
things.
answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pi was
So-
mixed up in that.
It can't be, once I squared it, it can't be round.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Okay, so we're going to go 7 sine of 52. I got to check my mode on this one. I'm in degrees. The life's good. And I get this answer. And then I got to divide that by the sine of 77. And I get 5 point, let's round one decimal place. So y equals 5.7.
So you have to divide 7.
5.516. That you have to divide it by sine of 77.
Yeah, so I did this, and then I divided by sine of 77.
Are we ever gonna have to do the sin and like the sin stuff? Are we ever gonna have to like multiply it, like do that, like not use calculator?
Yes, we'll talk. I'll show you today. We'll see when we don't get to use the calculator. So the other one would have been, and I didn't give myself very much room here, but sine of 77 over 7 equals the sine of,
51
thank you, over
X.
x. So that would have been x sine of 77 equals 7 times sine of 51. In terms of showing work, this is about as much as I would expect you to show, because a lot of it's done in the calculator. So this time it's 7 sine of 51, and then divided by the sine of 77. And I get 5.6 when I round it 1 decimal place.
So much math.
We haven't even gone to the hard part.
Number 2 is slightly different, okay, because we're kind of going to be looking for what?
The angle.
The angles, okay? So we're going to basically do what we just did. We're going to set up our relationship, and then we're going to kind of go from there. What should I call this side right here, just for reference? R, lowercase r. Okay. So we can find r first. I lied. We need to find the angles first. So let's find angle S. So sine of S over what?
12.7.
12.7 equals
Angle C.
sine of 74 over.
12.3.
Could I have chose sine of R?
Wait, don't we have to do
No, because you don't have it and you have two variable things.
Why
Okay.
can't you just do Pythagorean?
Because it's the right angle.
Because there's not right angle.
But, I thought like when you're finding angles.
Did you answer your question? Did you? Yeah, okay.
Wait, so I thought like when you're finding angles, you have to use the inverse.
So the very last step is going to be using the inverse. So I'm going to calculate, I'm going to leave this alone. I'm going to times this by 12.7 to get this out of there. I times it by 12.7 to get that out of there. And I'll see that the sine of S equals all that junk. So I'm going to, in my calculator, I'm going to go sine of 74 divided by 12.3.
Did you just decide to use sine just because of a whim or whatever, or could you not have used any of the others for this one?
It equals 0.9.
So why is it sine instead of cosine?
Like, could you have done it differently? I understand you can do it with sine, but could you do it with like?
No,
tangent or
it's the law of sines. So this is a rule that only works with sines. And then I got to times this by, sines can figure out sides, right? Yeah, and angles. So I get all of this and I get down to this 0.99252, and I don't want to round this, but that's what this equals right here. That is not my angle.
Instead of dividing it by 12.3, can we have just multiplied it by 1.0? Wait, 1.4?
No, that's not how that works.
Well, I think that's what the original had, but Dash 2 originally had the 4 digits.
So what do I do next?
I don't know.
You give me a second. Then you have to do the sine -1 thingy of the number.
Sine inverse. How do I want all of those digits in there. So a lot of calculators have this little button right here that says A and S, which stands for answer. I'm going to hit second answer.
That's where that is.
Okay. So that way I don't have to type any of that junk in. And it tells me that that angle S is
83.
83. That was a lot of work for finding the angles. I could use it, do the same thing to find R, or I could do what? So 180 minus 74 minus 83 would be a lot easier to tell me that that's 23 degrees.
About right.
So now I need to find side F or side R.
Gosh, dang.
Side what?
R.
What do you mean side R?
It says to find all unknown sides and angles.
Like,
Okay. There is no hypotenuse. Why is there not a hypotenuse?
because it's not a right angle.
It's not a right triangle.
Right angle.
So someone help me out here. This is going to be the sine of,
12.3.
well, not the sine of 12.3.
Can a triangle have two right angles?
What are we doing for the second?
23. No, give me 1 second.
Sine of 23
Hey, I was right.
over
Over R.
equals.
Sine of 83
Mm-hmm.
over 12.7.
Both is on the, write this down.
Good.
Then you multiply it again.
Okay. So I'm going to get R sine of 83 equals 12.7 sine of 23.
Just divide sine of 83.
Yep, we're going to, in our calculator, we're going to finish this off. 12.7 times sine of 23 divided by sine of 83. And I get that R equals 5 when we round that.
There we go. Next. Okay. Now we just have to draw triangles.
So Dalton asked, are we ever going to have to do these problems without a calculator? The answer is yes. As the only reason I would make you do that is if the angles are 30, 60, 90, 45, or 45, 90 triangles, okay? So we, at this point, should be able to draw these triangles with all of their sides, okay?
Sides, great.
So we're just kind of, this is review in a sense. I kind of hope that you know it. That's a 30, 60, 90.
I drew it the opposite way.
Okay, it's fine. So this here would be X. This would be X squared of 3
Okay, and then the top is 2x.
is 2X.
Yeah.
Or
Oh my god.
X, X, and radical 2X.
another way of writing this, the most generic form,
1, 1, 1, 2, and then radical 3.
so if I ask you what's the sine of 30 degrees, you should be able to tell me that the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Because it's opposite over hypotenuse.
What?
Well, we'll get there in just a second.
How do I know what a radical 3 is?
Okay, so how do we know what angle is 30 degrees and what angle is 60 degrees? Because I did
bigger
something
one.
like this on some thing on Pearson, and my triangle was drawn backwards, so I got every single problem wrong.
Okay.
I flipped the 30 and 60 degree angle.
You could
So you have to know that the 30 is across from the 30 is the generic. It's just the X. Across from the 60 is the X square root of 3. So Mark said, I drew the triangle backwards. I don't care as long as across from the 30 is X. Across from the 60 is X square root of 3. And across from the 90 degrees is 2X. Okay?
That's so funny.
It doesn't matter how you draw it as long as what it's really about what's across from it. That answer your question?
So-
And then the other triangle we have to deal with is 45, 45, 90. This one is an X, X,
And radical 2.
X radical 2, or
1, 1, radical 2.
How are we gonna do math in our head with radicals 3?
well, I'll show you right now. So let's say we had this next question, which is basically what we're going to be asked to do. What is the sine
1.
of 30 degrees? Why the door shut?
Andrew.
He just walked out. Okay. He was falling asleep. I guess I was boring him. Okay.
You said don't ask.
Okay. I thought I was boring you. Yeah, if you guys ever want to throw up, please don't ask. Because really, if you, like, for example, right, I would rather you throw up at the door than over here. Yeah.
No,
30
so pretend to throw up.
Sine. Sine is, so if we go SOHCAHTOA, sine is just the so part. So sine of 30 is opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine of 30 is 1/2.
Okay, now the sign of.
So the sine of 30 is opposite, which is 1, over hypotenuse, which is 2. So if you can draw these triangles, and I ask you, what's the tangent of 45? What's the sine of 60? You can do all the trig functions of these angles. Now, why am I only choosing sine today?
Because we're using the sine rule.
Because it's the law of sine. So you kind of have to know these. The sine of 45 is opposite over hypotenuse.
So don't we have to multiply radical 2?
So it's radical 2 over 2.
Okay.
I don't understand either way.
Which part?
Part.
So sine of 45 is
No,
up.
I know the sign, but I don't understand how you go 1 radical 2 and then you get.
You multiply by radical 2 over radical 2. Radical 2 times radical 2 is 2.
Oh. And then sine of 60 is radical 3 over 2.
Sine of 60, so is radical 3 over 2. I don't have to fix that one because why? Radical's already in the top, which we call the
I know the bottom.
numerator. Okay, so here's a question I could ask on the test that says solve without a calculator. So this would be a very fair non-calculator question. Law of sines. The rule says it's the sine of.
But it didn't give us 90 degrees.
Yeah. What the heck?
He did say that we
Let's
had
just go.
Okay.
Sine of what? Help me out here. Law of sines.
Sine of A.
Sine of 60 over 2 radical 3 equals.
Sine of C.
Why not C? Why am I?
B.
Why do I want to use B?
Because C has no side.
C doesn't have a side, and the question says
Solve
solve for B over.
I was joking.
It's a good joke.
It's like the joke we all
That's what I
thought. I was joking.
Yeah, I was joking on that question on the midterm.
Everything on the midterm. Listen, look, I'm always joking on all of my tests.
I joke on all this.
It's fun. I thought it was funny. Okay, sine of 60.
Sine of B.
What does sine of 60 equal?
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to tell you the equation.
Oh.
How did he get that sine of 60 is radical 3 over 2?
Because it's the other side.
Because we just did it. And how would we have done that if I hadn't just done it? I would have drawn a triangle with the different sides on it. Okay? So sine of 60 is radical 3 over 2 over 2 radical 3, which equals.
Can't do it.
Is it?
We don't like a fraction over a fraction.
But we could do it because
That's what
of
fourth grade
geometry.
teachers told me no.
They did.
Yeah, so we're not allowed.
Okay.
I said, you gotta do this, because
Wait,
I was
is
a
it
genius
same
then.
thing? Like,
Oh,
All of us
so
were
weird.
geniuses in fourth grade.
So dividing.
House is not yours.
Wait.
So this division here, if we fix this right here, okay, what is that? How do we fix that? This is where our 7th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade is going to come into play.
I don't
About fifth or sixth grade.
I know.
How do we handle that fraction over fraction?
We get rid of it. We need to do
You
the
multiply
multiplication.
radical 3 on both sides.
Okay. So we get radical 3 over 2. If I'm multiplying by 2 radical 3, multiplying by 2 radical 3, then this cancels, and we get sine b of 2 radical 3 over 2. Is that better?
Wait, so let me explain that again, because I'm not.
So he told me to multiply both sides by 2 radical 3. So it basically took that out and just put it up on the top here. And we could multiply both sides by 2. Okay,
To make it 0.
but it wouldn't be 0.
I'm joking.
Is there anything we can cancel at this point?
Two,
The 2's we can cancel.
radical 3, 2.
So this is, and I kind of don't like that I put this in the back, but so I'm going to move it. This is really radical 3 sine of b, if I cancel that, equals radical 3 over 2. We're solving for b. We kind of want things away from b.
So do we have to multiply by a radical 3?
We're not going to multiply by radical 3.
Divide it.
We're going to divide.
No.
Now watch what happens. If I divide by this, where is divide in this? The bottom. I just throw it down here in the bottom.
Oh. Wait, so why do you not have another fraction bar?
Because they already have one. This means divide. If I say, oh, also divide by radical 3.
Oh, we had to do 2? I thought you were saying we had to divide 2 by. That's why we're doing that.
So then we get, this cancels. Be careful, the 2 is in the bottom.
So it's 1/2.
So sine of b equals 1/2.
Then you have to.
$1 million question, b equals what?
Let me do
I
that
need
where
to
you're
find
at.
out.
Sine 1/2.
Oh.
30 degrees. Obviously, it's 30 degrees. How does she know that?
Obviously.
The bottom angles are the same and it's half. Because sine of 30
Because
degrees is
1/2 equals 30 degrees.
Because of this.
I said that.
Sine of 30
That's what I
degrees.
just said.
Okay, we just did that.
Where's her
So b
million?
equals
It's a million.
30 degrees.
Uh-huh.
And it's just that simple.
Would this be a good tattoo like that?
Three dots.
The
Triangle would be great tattoo.
The triangle would be good.
no, like the B, the sine equals 30. Like
Yeah. I like that.
$3 a pop.
Let's go.
You know, I always try to get you guys time to work on your group quiz, but
It's
Okay.
too hard. We're not gonna learn it all and then be able to do a group quiz without your help.
Yeah.
you do it every time.
Yeah, that's why I go next period and with Miss McCarthy.
She's in your group. All right, so also, we got the law of sines, but sine will also find the area of a triangle for us.
Okay. Wait, so.
Let me visually,
Okay.
Does that one have me 30?
let me visually show you how this works. Define the area of this triangle, and you don't actually have to know the height, which is kind of cool. But if I'm using the angle C, then I'm going to use the sides that are included or make that angle C. So the formula says take 1/2 A times B, so the sides, times the sine of C.
I need to write this.
Oh, I understand this completely.
Can you explain that again to Miss McCarthy?
I will. 1/2 the sides,
So like only one of the sides has this equilateral.
both sides.
But it's equilateral, right?
It's not equilateral. It's any type of
So
triangle.
it's not the angles inside of the triangle, it's the actual side lengths itself.
It's the side lengths, sine of the angle. So let's look at number 1. I think it'll be a lot easier here. So this area equals 1/2 8 times 6 I'm using this side and this side. So therefore, I'm going to use the angle in between sine of 87.
Don't we need
We
the?
just plug that straight in because it's all multiplication.
That's it. Boom.
At first I thought you said baby seven, not baby.
How's that
87?
87 if it looks 90?
Well, maybe the person that made this is on drugs, okay?
I was not on drugs. Thank you.
Mr. McConnell, you made this problem?
Yes.
Okay, I believe you.
Mr. McConnell?
Okay. It's 23.9671.
So 0.5, which is the same as a half, times 8 times 6 times the sine of 87. Boom, there's the area. Area of this triangle is, round to the nearest tenth, it's 24.0. Why am I putting that 0.0 there?
Because we rounded.
Because we round it, because it wants a tenth. No. But that just lets me know that you know that we did round to the tenth.
How do you round?
So they didn't, on the two problems I gave you, they didn't really muddy anything. The way to make this kind of harder
It's been defined.
is to give you all the sides, give you more information than you need. Here they didn't, right? So we have, but I want you guys to know that it's the two sides and then the angle that's included in between them, okay? So the area equals 0.5 times 6 times 5
0.5. Oh,
times 5 times sine of 140. Didn't give myself much room there.
why are you putting extra?
It's 9.6.
Dude, they're not, I didn't.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
On the last one, like the one where it actually tells us the formula, should we add extra lines to show that the angles aren't all the same,
Don't worry.
or are they?
Oh, so that angle mark is just saying this is where C is.
Oh,
So if they put, well, let me answer that in just a second. So we get area, this one is 9.6. Okay. She was asking this. I think we've seen this before.
Wait, that's impossible if it's 9. Oh, never mind.
Is it divided?
I was thinking of perimeter. Wait a minute. 6 plus 5 is 11.
Hope's question was, are all three of these angles congruent?
yeah. It says they are lines.
It does not. This means
It's an angle.
that they're congruent when I don't put a letter there. Oh, I guess I should put it on the screen. That means that those angles are congruent. When I put a letter here,
It just means
that's my way of saying, oh, this is where G is. Okay.
Oh, what if you put the letters on the outside? Does it
If I put the letter on the outside, then that means they're congruent.
Oh my god.
You know what? This is too complicated.
A is congruent to B.
I hate it.
So why don't we go ahead and, I think that this group quiz is kind of easy.
You think you're
See if you can knock out the first
16.
16 questions.
I can't even think of any more math right now.
Well,
8.1 group quiz is